Well, howdy. I'm glad you felt like stopping by today. A few weeks ago, I talked about magic words. And a word that's thrown about, I use it carelessly, and you probably do. It's a magic word because it means things to others that not necessarily what we think. And so I want to talk to you about that today. The word is ignorant or ignorance. It's a universal condition we all suffer. And the only variable between you and me and others is the particular level of ignorance. While I'm speaking in general terms, we all know more about some things than we do others. There might be something that you approach being an expert at. But I felt for some time that no one should consider themselves, nor should we consider anyone educated until we have some comprehension of our level of ignorance. Now we might say that person's ignorant or you're just ignorant. And we often use that word carelessly. It may not be the right word to use at all. But to some extent, in general terms, and I'm speaking mostly in general terms, to some extent we're all ignorant. How do we know that? Well, I believe anyone that's considered themselves and tried to know themselves, I think it was Shakespeare that advised, "To your own self be true." Anyone that's considered their personal situation realizes that there are things that are important that they don't know. So one way to recognize personal ignorance is if you think you understand life and you've got some things figured out, then you're ignorant. It's true. It's true. Apostle Paul said that if any man thinks he knows something, he knows nothing yet as he ought to know. I think it's good to try to live our life like a dry sponge. But not a mindless dry sponge that absorbs anything possible. But when we find something good, we should absorb it and consider it and test it, and if it's not good, put it away. Now, an idiot or a typical dry sponge can't do that, but we're supposed to be intelligent creatures. So if we want to dispel ignorance, what should we do? Well, we take in information, we evaluate it, we keep the good and toss that which is not good. A popular phrase is practice makes perfect. practice is a good thing. Practicing wise living, seeking a good life is a good thing. But if we practice carelessly, then we get really good at doing a thing wrong. And it seems that some people are that way. I've had acquaintances and people that I didn't know that well. Among those that I know in my life, and it distresses me to see particularly a young person to associate with someone and get their life screwed up, and they'll do away with that relationship and get in another one just like it. That distresses me. I suppose we've all done that. But how to practice? Well, practice carefully and practice doing a thing the right way. Practice life that way. There's a saying, particularly in computers, which I'm somewhat familiar with, even to the point that I realize that I'm ignorant of the computer world. That's some accomplishment, isn't it? But remember, I said at the beginning, no one should be considered educated until they have some idea, some comprehension of their level of ignorance. And I know enough about computers to know that largely and generally, I'm ignorant of them. So be careful how you learn and be careful what is believed. I don't intend to be cynical or arrogant, and I don't believe we can dispel our personal ignorance if we're either of those two, cynical or arrogant. So this universal condition that we suffer, there is some good news. Ignorance can be dispelled. The bad news is building anything worthwhile takes time and effort. And again, the bad news is destruction is immediate. I want to tell you a story that illustrates the level of ignorance that a person can have. Now, I mean nothing against the individuals in this story. It's a true story. I mean nothing personally, but it just illustrates this terrible thing called ignorance. When I was small, so young, I don't know exactly how old I was, 5, maybe 4. The neighbors had a milk cow, and she wasn't doing well. And although I was quite small when I was around and they were talking about this cow, how that she had quit milking and her calf wasn't doing well. And I knew as a child that the cow was starving. I muse about that here's a mother and father, parents, they had a cow that was starving and they thought she was sick. Well, what she needed was food and water, and she needed to get rid of a bad infestation of a lot of different bugs that animals get. I don't know, lice and fleas to begin with. So they called the veterinarian. Now this veterinarian was just a local farmer who had shown that he understood animals and could work with them and doctor them. He could pull a calf if a cow was having trouble birthing, and a variety of things that happens to animals on the farm. and he was considered the local veterinarian. He wasn't licensed. I don't know what his schooling was. So they called him, and he came and examined the cow. I remember I'm going to say I was 5. He took the cow's tail, among other things, and held her tail up, and at the end of a cow's tail, there's a joint in the bones, and the tail is really flexible at that joint. I'm going to compare it to a knee joint, okay? Every cow has that. I don't know how I knew that as a little kid. Maybe I just observed. But he made an issue, well, that's just what I thought. This cow has wolf on the tail. Wolf on the tail. And the owner said, well, what can we do? Is she going to die? Well, no doubt she would have if she had continued as she had. So he said, well, I need some salt and a rag to tie this up. And the wife and mother went to the house and got a container of table salt and a rag that was so filthy dirty it wasn't fit to wrap a cow's tail. And he made a slit in that joint, by the joint, and put salt in it and wrapped it up with that dirty rag. And the fella says, well, do you think she'll be all right? Well, she needs to stay in the barn and carry her feed and water to her. Just keep her in her stanchion. And he said, I think she'll be all right. He said, now, do you have any feed? Do you have any grain? Well, the fellow had some horse and mule feed that people in that time and place fed to their horse so that the horse would be able to work on the farm. Well, that would be all right, and the fellow was upset because horse and mule feed was expensive. And said, keep feed before. And there was a creek that ran just behind the barn. Clean, cool water. Some people would call it a mountain stream. It was just a small stream, but it ran year round. And he said, keep fresh water before this cow. And if she gets hay and dirt in it, which a cow will always do in a bucket, why, dump it out and get fresh. And keep all the feed before and all the good water that she'll eat and drink. Well, how long is this going to take? Well, a week, 10 days, maybe 2 weeks. But I think she'll be all right. Well, the cow did get all right. Why did that fellow call that wolf on the tail? Now, if he knew anything about cattle, he would be aware that every animal had that kink in the tail, with that flexible joint. I believe that he knew the people in his little rural community. He knew them well, and if he had gone in and told that fellow, said, well, your cow is starving to death, and she's got lice and other problems, then the fellow would have swore at him and sent him away and never called him again. Oh, and one other thing he said to do you have any motor oil? Well, like everyone else in the neighborhood, you never threw away oil, so he had some oil from an oil change in his old truck. And he said, take some of that used motor oil and pour it down her back and pour a lot of it on her head. Now, he didn't say that will get rid of the lice, but oil will do that. So that was one other thing he said to do. But if he had just said your cow starved to death and she's eat up with lice, that would have made the man mad. Well, why were they that ignorant? Well, I can't answer that question. It's a shame when I find myself, and perhaps you found yourself in such a situation where there's something that, as farmers might say, a blind sow would find, but you don't know any better, and that's the thing with ignorance. Sometimes we don't know any better. We don't realize we're ignorant. Well, whether you realize you're ignorant or not, you're ignorant. Accept the fact and work at doing better. Whatever it is in your life that you want to be better, work at it. Practice doing better. And as much as possible, figure out what better is. So don't worry about whether you're ignorant or not. You're ignorant. You can do better. Go and do better. Practice better. Don't just practice and practice wrong. And you'll find life improving. Remember, it takes time, but it's possible. It takes effort, but destruction, the bad effects of practicing wrong, is immediate. Maybe you can find something in that to do you some good. I hope so. You have a blessed day. Bye-bye.